Rule number 1 of being a mafia don: never show weakness. But Alessandro broke that rule the moment he looked at Lucia. She was just a help, invisible to everyone else, but to him? She was the only thing that mattered. And in his world, love doesn't save you. It puts a target on your back. Before we continue this story and you want to know what happens next, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from in the comment. The first time Alessandro De Luca noticed her, she was on her knees. Not in devotion. Not in seduction. Cleaning blood from his marble floor. The crimson stain glistened under the chandelier light, spreading thin over the white Italian tile. One of his men had dragged a traitor through the hall an hour earlier. The man had begged, screamed, cried for mercy. Alessandro had watched without blinking. Now the house was silent, except for the soft sound of a cloth moving in circles. He stood at the top of the staircase, suit jacket still on, tie loosened just slightly. His dark hair fell carelessly over his forehead, shadowing eyes that had terrified senators, judges, and rival bosses alike. And yet, his attention was fixed on the girl below. She was new, small, graceful, focused. She wore a simple black maid's dress, sleeves rolled slightly to reveal delicate wrists. Her dark hair was tied into a low bun, but loose strands framed her face. She didn't tremble. Didn't cry. She cleaned. Calm. Careful. As if blood was just another spill. Alessandro descended the stairs slowly, his polished shoes echoing against the floor. She heard him. Of course she did. But she didn't turn immediately. That intrigued him. Most people snapped to attention when he entered a room. When she finally looked up, her eyes met his directly. No fear. No defiance either. Just awareness. Her voice was soft but steady. Sir? I'll have this finished shortly. Her tone wasn't flirtatious. But it wasn't submissive in the way he was used to either. He stepped closer. Too close. The scent of her shampoo reached him first, something light, something clean. Jasmine, maybe? It clashed with the metallic scent of blood and gunpowder that still clung to him. What's your name? He asked. Lucia. Lucia. It rolled through his mind slower than it should have. He studied her face, smooth skin, long lashes, lips slightly parted from the effort of kneeling. There was nothing extravagant about her beauty. It was quiet. Natural. Dangerous in its own way. You're not afraid? He asked. Her hand paused for half a second before continuing to wipe. I need this job, she said simply. Honesty. That was rare in his world. He crouched down beside her, expensive suit brushing the marble floor. The proximity was deliberate. Testing. Her breath hitched, just a little. Ah. So she wasn't made of stone. He reached out and took her wrist gently, turning her hand over. A faint red smear stained her palm. Blood is hard to wash off, he murmured. Their faces were inches apart now. Her pulse fluttered beneath his thumb. I'll manage, she whispered. He watched the rise and fall of her chest. Watched the way her throat moved when she swallowed. He was used to women throwing themselves at him. Models. Actresses. Wives of politicians who wanted protection. They undressed themselves with their eyes. Lucia did not. She held his gaze. And that restraint sparked something hot and unfamiliar in his chest. He released her wrist slowly. Do you know who I am? He asked. Yes. And you still chose to work here. I don't choose comfort, sir. I choose survival. That answer lingered. He stood, towering over her again, but something had shifted. The air between them felt thicker. Charged. Finish up, he said. He turned to walk away, then paused. Lucia. She looked up again. Next time, you don't clean blood alone. You call someone. Her lips parted slightly. Yes, sir. He left her there, but for the first time in years, Alessandro De Luca did not go to his office. He went to his bedroom. And he thought about a maid kneeling on marble. Later that night, Lucia lay in her small staff quarters at the back of the estate. She could still feel his touch on her wrist. It had not been rough. That unsettled her more than violence would have. She had heard stories about him long before she applied for the position. Men disappearing. Rival families crushed. Entire businesses swallowed whole. A devil in a tailored suit. And yet, when he held her hand, there had been something else beneath the power. Something controlled. Contained. Something that made her stomach twist in ways she didn't understand. She pressed her thighs together unconsciously as she replayed the moment, their eyes locked. She hated that her body responded. Hated it. But she couldn't deny it. Upstairs, in a room large enough to house a small army, Alessandro stood shirtless before his window, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. He poured himself a drink. Didn't touch it. Instead, he remembered the warmth of her skin. The way her breath had changed when he got close. The way she refused to look away. Desire was nothing new to him. But this was curiosity. And curiosity was dangerous. Especially for a man with enemies. Especially for a girl who worked inside his walls. Across the city, another man watched the De Luca estate through binoculars from a black car parked far beyond the gates. He lowered them slowly. "Find out who the new maid is," he said coldly to the man beside him. Because in the world of monsters, love was always the weakest point. And Alessandro De Luca had just found his. Lucia learned quickly that the De Luca estate had rhythms. Mornings were quiet. Afternoons were strategic. Nights were dangerous. And Alessandro De Luca belonged to the night. 3 days passed without him speaking to her again. But she felt him. His presence. His gaze. Every time she entered the dining hall, she could sense his eyes assessing her movements. The way she carried a tray, the way she reached above her head to dust the tall windows, the subtle sway of her hips she didn't consciously control. He never said anything inappropriate. He didn't need to. Power spoke for him. And she was beginning to understand that the silence between them was far more intimate than words. On the 4th night, a storm rolled over the city. Thunder shook the estate's windows. Lightning cut through the sky in violent flashes. Lucia had just finished preparing tea in the kitchen when one of the guards approached. "The boss wants you upstairs." Her fingers tightened slightly around the porcelain cup. Upstairs meant his private floor. No staff went there unless summoned. She nodded. "Of course." The walk felt longer than usual. The hallway lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Rain pounded against the tall windows. She knocked once. "Enter." His voice was deep. Controlled. Calm. Lucia stepped inside. Alessandro stood near the fireplace, jacket removed, white dress shirt slightly unbuttoned at the collar. The room smelled faintly of whiskey and smoke. The firelight flickered across his features, sharpening the angles of his jaw, the darkness in his eyes. He didn't smile. He simply watched her close the door. "You may tea," he said. "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady. She crossed the room slowly, aware of the thickness in the air. Every step felt deliberate. Every movement exposed. She placed the tray down carefully. When she straightened, he was closer. Much closer. She hadn't heard him move. Her breath caught. "You walk like you don't belong to anyone," he murmured. Her heartbeat quickened. "I belong to myself." There it was again. That honesty. He reached up and gently removed the hair tie from her bun. The dark strands fell around her shoulders in soft waves. Lucia inhaled sharply. "That wasn't permission," she whispered. His eyes darkened. "I don't ask for permission." The words should have terrified her. Instead, heat pooled low in her stomach. He stepped closer until her back nearly brushed the edge of the desk behind her. His hand lifted, not roughly, and traced a slow path from her shoulder down to her wrist. Not gripping. Just exploring. Her skin burned beneath his touch. "You're not like the others," he said quietly. "I don't want to be." Thunder cracked loudly outside, shaking the room. For a moment, the world felt reduced to just the two of them. His hand moved to her waist. Firm now. Possessive. Her palms pressed against his chest, not pushing him away, not fully pulling him closer either. Testing. His body was warm. Solid. Controlled strength under expensive fabric. Do you understand what happens to women who get too close to men like me? He asked. Yes. And yet you're still here. Her fingers tightened slightly in his shirt. So are you. Silence. Then, his restraint snapped just enough. He pulled her against him. Not violently, but decisively. Her body fit against his as if the space had been waiting for her. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his chest, the tension coiled in him like a predator holding back. His hand slid up her back, fingers tangling slightly in her loose hair. He tilted her head just enough to expose her neck. His lips brushed her skin. Not a kiss. Just contact. Her knees weakened. A soft sound escaped her, barely audible, but he heard it. He always heard everything. Careful, he murmured against her neck. You're shaking. You're not, she breathed. He smirked faintly. I've had practice. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the room in stark white for a split second. And in that light, through the slightly parted curtains, a distant silhouette could be seen beyond the gates. Watching. A camera lens adjusted focus. Inside, Alessandro finally claimed her mouth. The kiss was slow at first. Measured. Testing dominance. But when she responded, when her fingers slid up to his collar and held him there, something changed. The kiss deepened. Heat flared between them. The storm outside raged louder, as if echoing the tension inside the room. He lifted her effortlessly and set her on the edge of the desk, stepping between her knees. Her hands moved to his shoulders now, holding on. Wanting. Needing. He pulled back just slightly, forehead resting against hers. If I start this, he said quietly, I don't stop halfway. Her lips were swollen. Her breathing uneven. Then don't, she whispered. And for the first time in years, Alessandro De Luca felt something dangerously close to losing control. Outside the estate gates, the man in the car lowered his camera slowly. A slow smile spread across his face. Yes, he murmured. That will do nicely. Because the fastest way to destroy a king was to find what he would burn the world to protect. The storm never stopped. Rain streaked down the tall windows like restless fingers. Thunder rolled across the sky in low, dangerous warnings. Inside the office, Lucia's fingers were still gripping Alessandro's collar. He was standing between her knees. Close enough that she could feel the heat of him through fabric. Close enough that breathing felt like work. You said you don't stop halfway, she whispered. His jaw tightened. He had built an empire on discipline. Control. Calculated cruelty. But right now, control felt thin. His hands slid from her waist to her thighs slowly, deliberately, pushing the hem of her dress up just enough to expose more skin. Not rushed. Not desperate. Intentional. Lucia inhaled sharply as his thumbs traced along the inside of her thighs, stopping just before crossing that final boundary. He was testing her. Giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she reached up and unbuttoned another button of his shirt. Then another. Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. I should walk out, she murmured. You should, he agreed. Either of them moved. His forehead pressed against hers again. The intimacy of it, the closeness, felt more dangerous than any weapon in his house. I will ruin you, he said quietly. Maybe I want to be ruined. That did it. He crushed his mouth against hers again, deeper this time. Hungrier. His hands tightened at her thighs, lifting her fully onto the desk as papers scattered to the floor. She wrapped her legs around his waist instinctively. He groaned low in his throat, the sound rough, almost surprised. Lucia had never been kissed like this. Not claimed. Not devoured. His hand slid up her back, fingers curling into her hair, tilting her head so he could explore her neck, her collarbone, the soft skin just beneath her ear. Every touch sent heat spiraling through her body. Her hands moved over his chest, hard muscle beneath warm skin, then down, gripping him closer. He paused again. One last moment of restraint. "Say it," he demanded softly. Her eyes were dark now. Breath uneven. "I want you." That was all he needed. He carried her to the large leather couch near the fire, laying her down slowly, not careless, not rough, but with unmistakable possession. He removed her dress inch by inch, eyes never leaving hers. And when he finally joined her, skin to skin, the world outside ceased to exist. The storm raged. The fire crackled. And inside that room, two lines were crossed forever. He moved with intensity, but also control, reading her reactions, learning the sounds she made, the way her body responded beneath him. It wasn't just hunger. It was discovery. Lucia clung to him, nails grazing his back, her voice breaking softly in the dim light. For the first time in years, Alessandro wasn't thinking about rivals. Or money. Or power. He was thinking about her. Only her. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the couch, the fire casting golden shadows over bare skin. Lucia rested against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, strong, steady. Too steady for a man who had just surrendered control. "You shouldn't stay," he said quietly. She tilted her head up. "Are you sending me away?" "No." His hand traced slowly along her arm. "I'm warning you." Silence stretched between them. "About what?" she asked softly. He looked toward the window, toward the darkness beyond the estate gates. "Men like me don't get to love," he said. The word hung there. Love. Either of them corrected it. Either of them denied it. Outside, in that same darkness, a black car engine started quietly. A man inside checked the photographs on his phone. Alessandro shirtless. Lucia in his arms. Perfect. He smiled coldly. "Prepare the message," he ordered. Because wars weren't won with bullets alone. Sometimes, they were won with heartbreak. Lucia woke before him. Dawn had softened the storm into a quiet gray drizzle. The fire had burned low, casting fading embers across the room. She was still wrapped in his arms. Alessandro De Luca, the man men feared, the man governments negotiated with in private, slept with his face buried slightly in her hair. His arm was heavy around her waist. Protective. Possessive. She studied him in silence. Without the sharp tension in his jaw, without the calculating look in his eyes, he seemed younger. Less carved from stone. Human. Her fingers traced lightly along the scar near his shoulder, a thin line, old but deep. He stirred. His eyes opened instantly. Alert. Always alert. For a second, instinct hardened his expression, until he realized where he was. Who he was holding. His arm tightened slightly. "You're staring," he said, voice rough from sleep. "You look different," she replied softly. "Different how?" "Like a man who doesn't carry the weight of an empire." A faint, almost invisible smirk touched his mouth. "That man doesn't exist." She shifted slightly, resting her chin on his chest. "He does. I'm looking at him." His fingers brushed down her bare back in a slow, absent motion. He shouldn't allow this. He knew that. Intimacy was leverage. And leverage was weakness. But he didn't push her away. Instead, he asked, "Do you regret it?" She held his gaze steadily. "No." The answer came too easily. That unsettled him. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair. Reality returned with the morning light, the meetings, the shipments, the enemies waiting for missteps. "You won't work downstairs today," he said. Her brows furrowed. "Why?" "Because I said so." "That's not an answer." He stood, retrieving his shirt from the floor. His tone sharpened slightly, not cruel, but firm. "You're not staff anymore." The words hung in the air. She rose to sit upright, the sheets sliding slightly down her shoulders. Then what am I? He paused while buttoning his shirt. That question had no safe answer. He crossed the room, stopping in front of her. His fingers gently lifted her chin. You're mine. The words were low, controlled. But they weren't a command. They were a confession. Her breath caught. Alessandro, don't say my name like that. Like what? Like you're not afraid of it. She almost smiled. I'm not. His jaw tightened again, not in anger. In something more dangerous. Attachment. He bent down and kissed her slowly. Not with the hunger of the night before. Not consuming. Claiming. When he pulled back, his eyes had shifted back into something colder. Stay in this room today, he instructed. If you need anything, call Marco. You're hiding me. I'm protecting you. From what? He didn't answer. Across the city, in a private penthouse lined with glass walls, Victor Romano studied the photographs again. Alessandro De Luca never allowed weakness. Never allowed distraction. And yet here she was. Lucia. A maid-turned-mistress. A liability. Victor leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger slowly against the table. Men like Alessandro believe they can control everything. He murmured. Including love. He turned to one of his men. Find her family. Back at the estate, Lucia stood at the large bedroom window, watching black cars pull in and out of the gates. She felt it now. The shift. Guards had doubled. Voices in the hallway were sharper. Something was changing. The door opened suddenly. Alessandro stepped inside, tension radiating from him like heat. You disobeyed me, he said quietly. Her heart skipped. I only walked to the window. That's not what I mean. He held up his phone. On the screen, a photograph. Her. Leaving his office the previous night. Hair loose. Dress slightly disheveled. Her stomach dropped. Where did you get that? He looked at her in a way she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not for himself. For her. They're watching, he said. The words were calm. But underneath them was something violent. She stepped toward him. Then let them. You don't understand. Then make me understand. His hands gripped her shoulders, firm but not hurting. In my world, when someone cannot reach me. His voice lowered. They reach for what I love. Silence filled the room. He had said it. Not mine. Not possession. Love. Lucia's breath trembled. Then don't love me, she whispered. His eyes darkened instantly. Too late. A knock echoed at the door. One of his most trusted men stepped in. Boss. Alessandro didn't look away from Lucia. Yes. We found something. Romano's men were near her old neighborhood this morning. The room went cold. Lucia's heart pounded. They won't touch you, Alessandro said quietly. But this time, it sounded like a promise made to himself. And promises in his world were paid for in blood. The estate no longer felt like a palace. It felt like a fortress. Guards rotated in tighter patterns. Security feeds played constantly on screens in Alessandro's office. Phones rang more often. Voices were lower. Sharper. Lucia noticed everything. And she noticed him most of all. Alessandro had changed. Not in how he touched her, that remained deliberate, intense, consuming. But in how he watched her. He no longer looked at her with curiosity. He looked at her like something that could be stolen. Like something he would kill to keep. You're suffocating me, she said quietly one evening. They were in his private dining room. Candlelight flickered between them. He hadn't let her return to staff quarters. She hadn't stepped outside the upper floor in 2 days. His fork paused midair. I'm keeping you alive. I'm not a hostage. His jaw tightened. You are a liability. The word stung. She stood slowly. Then let me go. Silence. The temperature in the room shifted instantly. Say that again. he said softly. But there was nothing soft in his eyes. I won't hide in a room while men decide whether I live or die. He rose from his chair in one controlled movement. You think this is about men deciding? His voice dropped lower. This is about me deciding. She stepped closer, refusing to retreat. You don't get to cage me because you're afraid. His hands came to her waist suddenly, pulling her against him. I am not afraid. Her heartbeat thundered. Then why are you shaking? That did it. He kissed her, not gentle this time. Not exploratory. Possessive. Frustrated. His hands gripped her tighter, lifting her effortlessly onto the dining table, plates scattering to the floor. The candlelight danced across her skin as his mouth moved to her neck. You don't understand what they'll do, he murmured against her skin. Then teach me, she breathed back. He paused. His forehead rested against hers. You are the only thing in this world I cannot control, he admitted. The confession was raw. And dangerous. She softened slightly, her fingers sliding through his hair. I don't want to be controlled, she whispered. I want to stand beside you. His eyes searched hers. No fear. No regret. Just loyalty. That shook him more than any rival ever had. He helped her down slowly this time. Pulled her into his chest. Held her there. Not as a possession, but as a man who knew he was standing at the edge of something irreversible. Across the city, Victor Romano finally received confirmation. Lucia's mother lived alone. Small house. Quiet street. Unprotected. He smiled. Send flowers, he instructed calmly. And a message. The flowers arrived the next morning. White lilies. Delivered to the estate gates. Lucia saw them before the guards did. A small card rested among the petals. She reached for it. Alessandro's voice cut through the air. Don't. Too late. She had already opened it. 3 words were written in careful ink. We see you. Her blood ran cold. Alessandro took the card from her slowly. His expression didn't change. But the air around him did. It felt lethal. He turned to one of his men. Lock down the estate. Then he looked at Lucia. Not angry. Not cold. Terrified. They've moved from watching, he said quietly. They're testing. Her throat tightened. Testing what? He stepped closer. How much I'm willing to burn. Silence. And for the first time since stepping into his world, Lucia understood something clearly. She wasn't just his weakness. She was his war. Alessandro cupped her face gently. I should send you away. She shook her head immediately. And go where? They already know my name. His hand dropped slowly. She was right. There was no safe place now. Victor had marked her. And in their world, being marked meant blood would follow. That night, as Lucia lay beside Alessandro, she couldn't sleep. His arm was wrapped tightly around her. As if even in unconsciousness, he feared she would disappear. Outside the estate walls, an engine idled quietly in the dark. A man adjusted the scope of a rifle. Not aiming yet. Just measuring distance. Waiting. Because disaster does not strike loudly at first. It waits. It studies. And then, it chooses its moment. Lucia could feel it. Even in the darkness, even with his body wrapped around hers, he wasn't resting. His breathing stayed too controlled. Too aware. He was listening. For engines. For footsteps. For death. Just before dawn, his phone vibrated. Once. He slid out of bed without waking her, or thinking he hadn't. Lucia's eyes opened the second he left the mattress. She followed quietly to the doorway. He stood near the window, back tense, voice low. Say that again. A pause. Then, where? Silence stretched heavy. Lucia stepped closer. What happened? He ended the call slowly. His face had turned into something carved from stone. They went to your mother's house. Her heart dropped. Is she? She's alive. The pause after that word nearly broke her. But her knees weakened slightly. They left a message on her door. He handed her his phone. A photo. Red paint splashed across white wood. Next time we don't knock. Lucia's hands trembled. Alessandro took the phone back. This is no longer testing, he said quietly. This is escalation. She looked up at him. I want to see her. No. The refusal came instantly. She's my mother. And you are my responsibility. The words clashed in the air. I am not an asset in your empire. His eyes flashed. And you are not walking into a trap. Silence. Then something shifted inside him. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. They want you to panic. They want you exposed. And what do you want? She demanded. His hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her close. I want Romano's head on my floor. The calm in his tone made it worse. This wasn't rage. It was decision. By afternoon, the estate had transformed into a command center. Maps. Phones. Names being whispered. Lucia watched him operate. This was the man the city feared. Orders given without raising his voice. Men moving instantly. No hesitation. No doubt. He was terrifying. And he was doing all of it for her. When the room cleared for a moment, she approached him. You're going to start a war. He didn't look up from the table. It already started. And people will die. Yes. The bluntness cut through her. Because of me. That made him finally look at her. No, he corrected. Because Romano believes love makes me weak. His hand gripped the edge of the table. He's about to learn it makes me merciless. That night, he didn't touch her the way he usually did. There was no slow teasing. No exploration. Just intensity. He pulled her against him in the dim bedroom, kissing her like he needed to remind himself she was still real. Still alive. His hands moved over her urgently, not just with desire, but with possession sharpened by fear. She responded just as fiercely. Clinging. Needing. Because when death circles you, pleasure feels sharper. More desperate. Afterward, they lay tangled together again. Her fingers traced his jaw. You're changing, she whispered. No, he replied quietly. I'm remembering who I am. She understood what that meant. The world would burn now. Across the city, Victor Romano watched smoke rise in the distance. One of his warehouses. Gone. He smiled slowly. Good, he murmured. He looked at another photograph on his desk. Lucia. Walking through the estate garden 2 weeks ago. Unaware. Soft. Alive. She's the right pressure point, he said calmly. And pressure breaks even the strongest men. He stood, adjusting his cuffs. Prepare the second move. Back at the estate, Alessandro stood alone on the balcony, city lights glowing beneath him. Lucia stepped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. For a moment, he relaxed into her. Just slightly. Promise me something, she said softly. He covered her hands with his. Anything. If it comes down to me or your empire. He turned to face her. She saw it in his eyes. The answer was already decided. You, he said. No hesitation. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the gates, a sniper adjusted his position. Closer now. Much closer. It happened at dusk. The sky was painted in bruised shades of purple and gold. The estate garden was quiet, deceptively peaceful. Lucia had insisted on stepping outside. Just 10 minutes, she told him earlier. I can't breathe in those walls anymore. Alessandro didn't like it. But he followed. 2 guards stayed at a distance. Another watched from the balcony above. Still, something in his chest felt wrong. Too quiet. Lucia walked slowly along the stone path, fingertips brushing over rose petals. The air smelled clean after the previous night's rain. For a moment, she almost forgot. Almost. You miss normal life? he asked from behind her. She turned slightly. I don't even remember what normal feels like. He stepped closer, sliding his hands around her waist from behind. His chin rested lightly near her temple. You were safer before me. Safer isn't the same as alive, she replied softly. He closed his eyes briefly. That was when it happened. A sharp crack split the air. Not thunder. Not a door. A gunshot. Lucia gasped as something warm splattered across her cheek. Alessandro's body jerked violently behind her. For a split second, she didn't understand. Then his grip tightened painfully before loosening. He stumbled back. Blood bloomed across his white shirt, just below his shoulder. The world exploded into motion. Guards shouting. Another shot fired, missing. Alessandro grabbed Lucia roughly and threw her down behind a stone fountain as bullets chipped marble around them. Stay down, he barked. She stared at the spreading red stain across him. You're bleeding, I said, stay down. His voice was sharp, commanding, but she saw the flicker in his eyes. Pain. Rage. Snipers on the roof returned fire. Chaos filled the garden. Lucia's ears rang. Another shot cracked. One of the guards fell. The attack lasted less than 30 seconds. But it felt endless. Then silence. The sniper was gone. Alessandro leaned heavily against the fountain edge, breathing controlled but strained. Lucia crawled to him. Her hands pressed against his wound instinctively. Blood soaked through her fingers. You said they wouldn't touch you, she whispered, panic breaking her voice. He gave a strained half-smile. They missed. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. He grabbed her wrist gently. Look at me. She did. If that bullet had gone 6 inches lower. His jaw tightened. They weren't aiming to scare me. They were aiming to kill you. No. His eyes hardened. They were aiming to make you watch. The realization settled cold in her stomach. This wasn't about territory anymore. It was psychological. Cruel. Calculated. Hours later, the doctor stitched the wound in his private study. It had passed clean through muscle. Painful. But not fatal. Lucia refused to leave the room. She stood near him the entire time, pale but steady. When they were finally alone, she approached him slowly. You could have died. I didn't. That's not the point. He reached for her hand, pulling her gently between his knees as he sat on the leather chair. His hands rested on her hips. They're escalating, he said quietly. So will you. Yes. The calm in his voice frightened her more than the gunshot had. She cupped his face. This is my fault. His hands tightened instantly. Never say that again. If I wasn't here, if you weren't here, they'd find another way. His eyes searched hers intensely. This is what men like Romano do. They look for leverage. She swallowed. And if he decides I'm easier to reach than you? The silence stretched too long. He stood abruptly despite the pain, pulling her into his chest. They will not take you from me, he said low and lethal against her hair. It wasn't just a promise. It was a vow. Across the city, Victor Romano received confirmation. The bullet hit. But he's alive. Victor exhaled slowly. Good. He leaned back in his chair. Now he knows it's personal. He looked at the next file placed before him. Blueprints. Delivery routes. Staff schedules. And one highlighted detail. Lucia's daily routine. He tapped it once. Phase 3. He ordered. Back at the estate, Lucia lay awake beside Alessandro again. Only this time, she could still see the blood when she closed her eyes. She turned toward him carefully, mindful of the bandage wrapped around his shoulder. You chose me, she whispered in the dark. His eyes opened instantly. Every time. She pressed closer. Unaware that somewhere beyond the gates, a car had just parked. Engine off. Lights out. Waiting. The estate had never been breached. Not once. Alessandro rebuilt security after the shooting. More guards. Rotating shifts. New surveillance blind spots eliminated. Background checks rerun on every single employee. No one entered without being stripped down to history and bone. Lucia watched it all unfold with a growing weight in her chest. This wasn't just protection anymore. This was obsession. He barely left her side now. Meetings were shortened. Calls were taken in the same room she occupied. At night, he held her like the darkness itself might steal her. "You don't have to hover," she told him one afternoon as he stood behind her while she tried to read. "I'm not hovering. You're breathing down my neck." He leaned closer deliberately, his lips brushing just beneath her ear. Good. Despite everything, he'd still flared between them. That was the dangerous part. Even with war circling them, they still found each other in the quiet moments. Later that evening, she insisted on helping in the kitchen. "I need to do something normal," she said. He didn't like it. But he allowed it. 2 guards stood outside the kitchen doors. Lucia chopped vegetables slowly, trying to steady her thoughts. The estate felt tense tonight. Too still. One of the newer staff members, a replacement hired after the shooting, worked silently at the far counter. A young man. Quiet. Efficient. Unremarkable. Lucia noticed nothing unusual. Until she reached for the wine bottle. It wasn't the label. It wasn't the cork. It was the weight. Slightly off. Before she could process it, the kitchen doors swung open. Alessandro stepped inside. His eyes went immediately to her hands. "Don't open that." His voice cut through the room like a blade. Everyone froze. Lucia blinked. "It's just wine, it's not." The young kitchen staff member moved suddenly. Too suddenly. His hand dove beneath the counter. A gun appeared. Everything exploded at once. Alessandro lunged forward, knocking Lucia sideways as a shot rang out. The bullet shattered glass behind them. Guards stormed the room. The young man tried to fire again. He didn't get the chance. 3 bullets tore through his chest. He collapsed against the counter, blood spreading across polished stone. Silence fell heavy. Lucia's ears rang. Alessandro's body shielded hers completely, his arm tight around her shoulders. She looked past him at the body on the floor. "He was inside," she whispered. Alessandro didn't respond. His jaw flexed once. That was all. An hour later they stood in his office. Security footage played on repeat. The new hire had passed background checks. False identity. Clean history. Romano had planted him weeks ago. Waiting. Patient. "You said no one could get in," Lucia said softly. "No one was supposed to." She stepped toward him. "They're getting closer." He turned to her slowly. "Yes." No denial. No reassurance. Just truth. Her voice trembled slightly. "If he'd been faster, he wasn't. But if—" His hands grabbed her face firmly. "There is no if." His eyes were darker than she had ever seen them. "This is my fault. I underestimated how far he'd go." "You didn't underestimate him," she said. "You underestimated what I mean to you." The words landed hard. Because they were true. He released her slowly. "He won't come through guards again," Alessandro said quietly. "He'll try something else." "How do you know?" "Because if I were him," his gaze sharpened, "I'd stop aiming at the king." A cold realization settled over her. "You'd aim at the queen." Silence confirmed it. That night felt different. No passion. No heat. Just closeness. They lay facing each other in the dark. "I can't lose you," he said quietly. The vulnerability in his voice was almost worse than the gunfire. She reached up, brushing her thumb over his lips. "You're not going to." But even as she said it, a strange unease curled in her stomach. Across the city, Victor Romano reviewed the failed infiltration calmly. "1 dead soldier," his lieutenant said nervously. Victor nodded. "Acceptable." He studied a map of the estate grounds. "There are too many guards inside now." He tapped the outer perimeter instead. She won't always be behind walls. He looked up slowly. And next time. He smiled faintly. We won't miss. Back at the estate, Lucia finally drifted to sleep in Alessandro's arms. Outside the gates, a delivery truck slowed briefly. Just long enough for someone inside to study the guard rotation. Just long enough to confirm something important. Patterns. Even fortresses have patterns. And patterns can be broken. Lucia hadn't left the estate grounds in 3 weeks. 3 weeks of locked gates. Armed escorts. Closed curtains. 3 weeks of watching Alessandro carry war in his eyes. She saw what it was doing to him. He was winning. Romano had lost warehouses. Routes. 2 trusted captains. But winning looked ugly on him lately. Sharp. Hollow. Possessive. You can't keep fighting like this. She told him that morning as he adjusted the bandage on his shoulder. I can. You're bleeding for me. I'd bleed more. That wasn't romantic. It was terrifying. She stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest. I don't want you to destroy yourself. I'm not destroying myself, he said quietly. I'm protecting what's mine. There it was again. Mine. She didn't argue. Instead, she made a different decision. One she didn't tell him about. At noon, she asked Marco, the most loyal of Alessandro's men, for a small favor. I just want to visit the chapel down the road, she said softly. 5 minutes. I'll wear a scarf. No one will recognize me. Marco hesitated. The boss won't approve. Then don't tell him. That was the mistake. Not arrogance. Not rebellion. Just longing. She needed air that didn't taste like fear. After 20 minutes of persuasion, and a promise to return quickly, Marco agreed to a short drive. 2 cars. 4 guards. Quiet. Controlled. Lucia felt the sun on her face for the first time in weeks as she stepped out near the small stone chapel. It felt normal. She breathed in deeply. Inside, it was empty. Candles flickered gently. She knelt. Not to beg for safety, but for strength. For him, she whispered. Keep him safe. Outside, engines passed occasionally. Nothing unusual. Nothing loud. Which is why no one noticed the parked utility van half a block away. Alessandro realized she was gone when he walked into the bedroom and found it empty. The air changed instantly. Where is she? He asked sharply. A pause. Too long. Marco stepped forward slowly. She wanted 5 minutes. Alessandro didn't shout. Didn't explode. He just went very, very still. Where? The chapel. Alessandro's phone was already in his hand. Bring her back. Now. Lucia stepped out of the chapel 10 minutes later. Something felt wrong. The street seemed quieter. Too quiet. Marco opened the car door for her. Let's go. She nodded. Then, a van engine roared to life. Tires screeched. Before anyone could react, the van swerved violently, blocking the front escort car. Doors flew open. Masked men? Fast. Precise. Gunfire exploded through the air. One guard dropped instantly. Another barely managed to return fire before being hit. Marco shoved Lucia toward the car. Get inside! Her heart pounded violently. She reached for the handle. A hand grabbed her arm. Hard. Rough. She screamed. Gunshots echoed again. Marco tackled one attacker, but another struck him from behind. Lucia struggled, kicking, clawing. Let me go! A sharp sting pierced her neck. A needle. Her vision blurred almost instantly. No. No, 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 the world tilted. Voices became distant. She saw Marco trying to rise again, then everything faded into darkness. Alessandro's car was already tearing down the road when his phone rang. He answered before it finished the first ring. Silence on the other end. Then a familiar voice. Calm. Mocking. You should have kept her inside. Alessandro's knuckles went white around the phone. If you touch her, oh, I already have. The line cut. Alessandro didn't breathe. Didn't blink. For 3 seconds, the world felt suspended. Then something inside him snapped completely. Find them, he said quietly to the men in the car. His voice wasn't angry. It was empty. Burn every building he owns. Drag every associate into the street. I want the city screaming. He looked out the window, jaw locked tight. Because the one thing he had sworn would never happen, had just happened. They hadn't just aimed at the queen. They had taken her. In a dark warehouse across the river, Lucia slowly regained consciousness. Her hands were tied. Her head throbbed. The air smelled like oil and rust. A chair scraped across concrete. Footsteps approached. She forced her eyes open. Victor Romano stood in front of her. Well-dressed. Calm. Curious. So, he said softly, tilting his head. You're the girl who made a king forget how to be ruthless. Her pulse raced. Kill me, she whispered. He smiled faintly. Oh no. He crouched in front of her. That would be too quick. Outside the warehouse, engines began to gather in the distance. Because Alessandro De Luca was coming. And when he arrived, the city would drown in blood. The warehouse lights flickered above her. Lucia's wrists burned against the rope. Her head throbbed, but her mind was clear now. Fear had passed. What remained was certainty. Alessandro would come. And then would die. Victor Romano stood a few feet away, adjusting his cuffs as if he were preparing for dinner instead of war. You know, he said conversationally, men like him never lose because of bullets. Lucia said nothing. They lose because of attachment. He crouched in front of her again. Tell me something, he continued softly. When he looks at you, does he look powerful? She met his gaze steadily. He looks human. Victor smiled thinly. That's the problem. Outside, engines roared. Black cars surrounded the warehouse from every angle. Alessandro stepped out before the vehicle fully stopped. His face was no longer sharp with anger. It was calm. Terrifyingly calm. Surround it, he ordered. Men moved instantly. Explosives placed at exits. Snipers positioned. He walked toward the entrance alone. Inside, one of Victor's men rushed in. He's here. Victor stood slowly. Of course he is. He looked at Lucia. Let's give him a choice. The warehouse doors burst open with a thunderous crash. Gunfire erupted immediately. Alessandro's men stormed in. Chaos. Screams. Bullets tearing through metal and flesh. Alessandro moved through it like a shadow of death, precise and unstoppable. 2 men fell before they even raised their weapons. He didn't hesitate. Didn't slow. Until he saw her. Tied to a chair in the center of the room. Bruised. But alive. Everything else blurred. He reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees in front of her. Lucia. Her breath caught at the sight of him. You came. Always. He cut the ropes quickly, hands trembling just once before steadying. Gunfire continued behind them. Victor stepped out from the shadows slowly, holding a gun loosely at his side. You're predictable, Victor said calmly. Alessandro stood, positioning himself slightly in front of Lucia. This ends now. Victor tilted his head. It does. And then, he raised the gun. But not at Alessandro. At Lucia. Time fractured. Alessandro moved instantly, shoving her aside as the shot rang out. The bullet tore through her abdomen instead of her heart. She collapsed against him. The sound she made, soft, shocked, confused, was worse than any scream. Alessandro caught her as she fell. The world around them dissolved into distant noise. Victor fired again. One of Alessandro's men shot him through the throat before the second bullet landed. Victor dropped. Dead before he hit the ground. But Alessandro didn't look. He was on the floor, cradling Lucia in his arms. Blood spread quickly beneath her. Too quickly. No, he whispered. His hands pressed against the wound. Stay with me. Her lips trembled slightly. It doesn't hurt, she lied. His voice broke for the first time since he was a boy. I told you. I'd protect you. You did, she whispered. Her hand lifted weakly to his face, brushing his cheek. You chose me. Every time, he choked. Her breathing grew shallow. I don't regret it, she said softly. Tears slid down his face, silent, furious. I would burn the world for you. She smiled faintly. I know. Her fingers tightened slightly in his shirt, then loosened. Her eyes lost focus, and the world stopped. The warehouse fell silent except for distant sirens. Alessandro remained on the floor long after the shooting ended, holding her, rocking slightly, as if refusing to accept gravity. His men stood back. No one dared speak. When he finally looked up, something in him was gone. Not broken. Erased. Clear the city, he said quietly. And they did. Over the next weeks, every remaining ally of Victor Romano disappeared. Businesses burned. Accounts drained. Men vanished without explanation. The city learned a new definition of ruthless. But none of it brought her back. Months later, the estate felt colder. Empty. Alessandro stood in the garden where she once walked. The roses had bloomed again. He touched one gently. Blood had washed from the marble. But memory hadn't. They said he became untouchable after that. Emotionless. Unreachable. They were wrong. He felt everything. He just never allowed anyone close enough again to see it. Because loving her had made him human. Losing her had turned him into something far worse. And in the end, the most powerful mafia boss in the city did win the war.